Hey, it's James. Welcome back to the channel. Now, Massachusetts. It's got history, it's got beans, it's got some truly bizarre accents. But beneath the colonial charm and the Dunkin' Donuts on every corner, there's a darker side. A side filled with stories that have been whispered for generations, tales of creatures with glowing eyes, ghostly women on the shore, and shadows that watch you while you sleep. Tonight, we're putting on our bravest faces and diving headfirst into the creepiest unsolved horror legends Massachusetts has to offer. So grab a blanket, maybe a flashlight, and join me as we explore the stories that just refuse to die. These aren't just campfire tales, they're woven into the very fabric of the state. From the dense woods of the West to the foggy shores of the Boston Harbor, these legends have a way of sticking around, crawling under your skin and staying there. They've been passed down, evolving with each telling, yet their core of chilling terror remains unchanged. They're the reason people glance over their shoulders on a dark night or feel a shiver run down their spine in an old building. These stories have a life of their own, and frankly, they're terrifying. But that begs the question, doesn't it? What gives these legends such staying power? Is it a grain of truth buried deep within the fiction? Is it just our collective fear of the unknown, given a name and a face? Or is it something else entirely? Are there really creatures in the woods and ghosts on the water? Tonight we're going to peel back the layers of these tales, look at the evidence, or lack thereof, and try to figure out what makes these Massachusetts legends so uniquely and enduringly creepy. This is Unraveling Massachusetts' Creepiest Horror Legends. Alright, let's kick things off with a real classic, a creature feature if you will. The story of the Moth Man. Now I know what you're thinking, James, isn't Mothman a West Virginia thing? And yes, the most famous sightings were around Point Pleasant. But like any good cryptid with a flair for the dramatic, this guy apparently likes to travel. Or maybe Massachusetts has its own winged weirdo that just happens to fit the same description. The legend is simple and spooky. A massive, man-sized creature with giant wings and, the piece de resistance, glowing red eyes. The descriptions are always the best part of these stories. People don't just see a big bird, they see something that defies explanation. It's not an owl, it's not a bat, it's not a guy in a very elaborate and frankly dangerous-looking suit. It's described as being humanoid but with these enormous moth-like wings spanning 10 feet or more. And those eyes. Witnesses consistently mention these two burning red lights, like bicycle reflectors from hell, staring out of the darkness. It's the kind of detail that really sticks with you. Sightings aren't just a thing of the past either. While the most famous flap was in the 1960s, people in the more wooded rural parts of Massachusetts have reported seeing something similar over the years. A fleeting glimpse of a massive shape swooping over a dark road, or a pair of red eyes peering from the tree line. These encounters are often brief, leaving the witness questioning their own sanity. Was it a trick of the light, an overactive imagination? Or did they just lock eyes with a genuine, grade-A monster? The story gets even darker when you look at the folklore surrounding it. Mothman isn't just a passive observer, a big spooky bird guy minding his own business. He's often seen as an omen, a harbinger of doom. The original sightings in West Virginia were famously linked to the tragic collapse of the Silver Bridge in 1967. This adds a whole new layer of dread to the legend. Is he causing these disasters? Or is he just showing up to watch? I have to say either option is pretty unsettling, so what's the explanation? Skeptics, and I tend to lean this way, have some pretty solid theories. The most common one is a misidentified bird, like a large owl, maybe a sandhill crane. Under the right or wrong lighting conditions with a little bit of panic thrown in, a big bird could look pretty monstrous. The glowing red eyes could be explained by the tapetum lucidum, the reflective layer in many animals' eyes, catching the light from a car's headlights. It's a logical, sensible explanation, but where's the fun in that? The people who saw it swear it wasn't a bird. They describe a feeling of pure primal fear that came with the sighting, something they'd never experienced before. They talk about the unnatural way it moved, the sheer size of it. It's easy to dismiss these accounts from the comfort of our homes, but when you're alone on a dark road and you see something you can't explain, logic might just fly out the window, along with, a giant Mothman. The origin of this creature is a total mystery. Is it an undiscovered species? An extraterrestrial being doing a bit of sightseeing, a supernatural entity, a government experiment gone wrong? The theories are as wild as the creature itself. There's no body, no feathers, no clear photographs, All we have are these chilling first-hand accounts that have been passed down, creating a monster that lives in the shadows of our collective imagination. What I find most interesting is how the legend persists. It taps into a very fundamental fear of the dark, of what might be lurking just beyond the reach of our porch lights. The idea of a silent, winged observer watching us from the trees is inherently creepy. It feels ancient, like a monster from a forgotten mythology that has somehow survived into the modern age. Its glowing red eyes a stark reminder that we might not be alone in the woods. And in Massachusetts, with its vast forests and quiet back roads, it's the perfect setting for a creature like Mothman to thrive. The story takes on a local flavor, becoming part of the state's unique tapestry of the strange and unexplained. People will point to a patch of dark woods and say, that's where someone saw it, and the legend grows a little stronger, a little more real. Ultimately, whether you believe in a literal Mothman or not, the story serves its purpose. It's a fantastic piece of modern folklore, a monster for our times. It represents the unknown, the things we can't explain away with science just yet. And as long as there are dark nights and lonely roads in Massachusetts, you can bet people will keep looking to the skies wondering if they might just catch a glimpse of those glowing red eyes. But maybe, just maybe, hope they don't. From the woods we now head to the water. The Boston Harbor is steeped in history, a place of revolution, trade and, if you believe the stories, a whole lot of ghosts. But one specter stands out from the rest, the White Lady of the Boston Harbor. This isn't your average run-of-the-mill chain-rattling ghost. No, this apparition has a very specific and very grim job description. She's a harbinger of doom, a spectral warning system for sailors. The tale is a classic maritime tragedy, the kind that feels like it was written to be told on a foggy night. The most popular version of the story centers on a woman whose husband, a sailor, was lost at sea during a terrible storm. Devastated, she would walk the shores of the harbor islands, staring out at the waves, endlessly waiting for a ship that would never return. Eventually, she died of a broken heart, but her spirit, they say, never left. Now, she's a permanent resident of the harbor, a ghostly figure clad in white. Sailors and lighthouse keepers have reported seeing her for centuries, a luminous form walking along the rocky coastline of Fort Warren on George Island, or near the Boston Light on Little Brewster Island. She appears just before a storm is about to hit, her silent presence a more terrifying warning than any barometer. To see the White Lady is to know that danger is on the horizon. Imagine being a sailor a couple hundred years ago. You're out on the water, the sky is clear, and then you see her, a shimmering white figure on the shore where no one should be. The sight alone would be enough to chill you to the bone, but then you remember the stories. You know what her appearance means. It's not just a ghost, it's a death sentence, a promise of wind, waves, and a watery grave for those who don't heed her warning. Of course, a skeptic would say there are plenty of logical explanations. The fog that so often blankets the Boston Harbor can play tricks on the eyes. A trick of the light, a swirl of mist, the lonely mind of a sailor far from home. All of these could easily conjure a ghostly image. It's easy to connect a random sighting to a subsequent storm after the fact, creating a pattern where none exists. That's just how our brains work. We look for meaning, for cause and effect. But the sheer number of accounts is what gives me pause. This isn't just one or two isolated incidents. The legend of the White Lady is old, really old. It's been a fixture of harbor lore for generations. Different people at different times have described the same thing. A woman in white, an overwhelming feeling of sadness and dread, and a storm that follows soon after. At a certain point you have to wonder if it's more than just fog. Her story is also incredibly specific. She isn't just haunting a place, she's reenacting her own tragedy. She's forever searching for her lost love, and in doing so, she tries to prevent others from sharing his fate. There's a sad, poetic quality to it. She's not a malevolent spirit trying to cause harm. In her own ghostly way, she's trying to help, to warn others away from the same heartbreak that claimed her. It's a ghost story with a purpose, which makes it even more compelling. The setting is perfect too. The Boston Harbor Islands are full of history, isolation, and old stone forts. Fort Warren, a common site of her appearances, was a Civil War prison. It has its own collection of ghost stories. The whole area feels like it's saturated with memory and emotion. It's the kind of place where you feel like the past is never really gone, just lingering beneath the surface. A perfect haunting ground for a lonely spirit. And the legend endures. Even today, with modern weather forecasting and GPS, boaters in the harbor share the story of the White Lady. Some claim to have seen her themselves, a fleeting white shape on a distant shore. She's become a part of the harbor's identity, a piece of living folklore. She represents the power and danger of the sea, a reminder that for all our technology, we are still at the mercy of nature. So is she real? Is there a spectral woman in white wandering the shores of the Boston Harbor, her ghostly heart still aching for her lost love? Or is she a figment of our collective imagination, born from the fog and the fear of the unforgiving ocean? I don't have the answer. But if I were ever sailing in Boston Harbor and saw a lone woman in white on the shore, I think I'd turn the boat around and head for port, just in case. Now we move on to a story that needs no introduction, a chapter of American history so dark and frankly so bizarre that it feels more like fiction than fact. I'm talking, of course, about the Salem Witch Trials. This isn't a legend about a single monster or ghost. It's the story of how an entire community became the monster. It's a tale of fear, paranoia, and mass hysteria that resulted in the deaths of 20 people and left a stain on the town that has never washed away. The year is 1692. The place is Salem Village, a small, isolated Puritan community. It all starts innocently enough, if you can even call it that. A few young girls, including the local reverend's daughter and niece, start having fits. They're screaming, throwing things, contorting their bodies into strange positions and complaining of being pinched and pricked by invisible forces. The local doctor, unable to find a physical cause, offers a diagnosis that would change everything: witchcraft. This is where things spiral out of control with terrifying speed. Pressured by the magistrates, the girls begin to name names. Their first 3 accusations are against women who are already social outcasts: a beggar, a woman who rarely attended church, and Tituba, the Reverend Paris's enslaved woman from the Caribbean. Tituba, likely under duress, confesses to witchcraft and spins wild tales of flying on sticks and meeting with the devil, opening the floodgates for more accusations. Suddenly, no one is safe. The accusations start flying, targeting more and more respected members of the community. It becomes a perfect storm of social anxieties. Neighbor turns against neighbor, using the accusations to settle old scores, land disputes, or simply out of pure, unadulterated fear. To deny the existence of witches was to be accused of being one yourself. The legal system, such as it was, completely broke down. Spectral evidence, testimony that a victim's spirit had appeared to them and caused them harm, was admitted in court. How do you defend yourself against someone's dream? The result was a nightmare. Over 200 people were accused. 19 were found guilty of witchcraft and hanged on Gallows Hill. One elderly man, Giles Corey, refused to enter a plea and was pressed to death with heavy stones, a particularly brutal and horrifying end. Others died in the squalid prisons while awaiting trial. It was a period of absolute madness, fueled by religious extremism and a deep-seated fear of the unknown. Eventually, the hysteria burned itself out. The governor intervened, the court was dissolved, and the remaining prisoners were released. But the damage was done. Salem was left to grapple with what it had done, with the innocent lives it had taken. And this is where the ghost stories begin. Because a place with that much pain, that much fear and injustice, is bound to have some lingering spiritual residue. Today, Salem has embraced its dark past, for better or worse. It's a tourist destination for all things spooky. But beneath the commercialism, many locals and visitors report genuine paranormal experiences. The ghost of Bridget Bishop, the first person executed in the trials, is said to haunt the Lyceum Bar and Grill, which stands on the site of her old apple orchard. People report the smell of apples when none are present, or see an apparition in a full-length gown. Giles Corey is another prominent ghost. His tortured spirit is said to haunt the Howard Street Cemetery, the site where he was pressed to death. Legend says his ghost appears just before a major disaster strikes the town, a final grim curse from a man who has shown no mercy. His angry, vengeful spirit is a stark contrast to the tragic figure of the White Lady. The Joshua Ward House, built on the land where Sheriff George Corwin, the man who signed the death warrants, once lived, is considered one of the most haunted places in Salem. Visitors and employees have reported being choked by unseen hands, feeling cold spots, and seeing a full-bodied apparition of a woman with wild black hair, believed to be one of the accused witches still seeking justice against the sheriff. What's truly terrifying about the Salem Witch Trials is that the monsters were human. There were no demons or devils, just people. It's a powerful and chilling reminder of how easily fear can be weaponized, how quickly a society can turn on itself. The ghosts of Salem aren't just the spirits of the dead, they are the echoes of that fear, a permanent scar on the landscape. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, when you walk the streets of Salem, you can't help but feel the weight of its history, a history that serves as a permanent, horrifying warning. Alright, let's move from historical horror to something a bit more modern, a phenomenon that is deeply personal and honestly, universally terrifying. We're going to Worcester to talk about the Shadow People. This isn't a legend tied to a specific place or a single tragic event. This is a story that happens in your own home, often in your own bedroom in the dead of night, and frankly, it's one of the creepiest concepts I've ever come across. So, what are Shadow People? The accounts are remarkably consistent, whether they come from Worcester, Massachusetts, or anywhere else in the world. People wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes experiencing sleep paralysis, and see a figure in their room. It's not a ghost, not in the traditional sense. It's a solid black silhouette, a void in the shape of a person, completely devoid of features. Sometimes it's just standing in the corner, watching. Other times, it moves closer. The forms they take can vary. The most common is a simple, human-shaped shadow. But some people report seeing a figure wearing a wide-brimmed hat, often referred to as the Hat Man, which is just an absolutely terrifying detail for some reason. Others describe them as being more like wisps of smoke or cloaked figures. But the one unifying element is that they are pure three-dimensional darkness. And the feeling they bring with them is always the same absolute, soul-crushing terror. People who encounter them don't just feel scared, they report an overwhelming wave of dread, anxiety, and pure malevolence. It feels like the entity is feeding on their fear. It's not just a passive observer, it's a predator, and you are its prey. This emotional component is what separates these encounters from a simple trick of the eye. Worcester, being a large old industrial city with a lot of old houses and apartments, has its fair share of these stories. People share their experiences in online forums and with local paranormal investigators, describing these shadowy figures appearing at the foot of their beds or lurking in dark hallways. The stories are often intensely personal and told with a conviction that is hard to dismiss, even for a skeptic like me. So what's the scientific explanation? There are quite a few, actually. The most prominent theory is that these are hypnagogic or hypnopompic hallucinations, vivid, dreamlike experiences that occur as you're falling asleep or waking up. When combined with sleep paralysis, a condition where your brain is awake but your body is still asleep and unable to move, it's easy to see how the brain could conjure up a terrifying dark figure to explain the feeling of fear and helplessness. Our brains are also hardwired to see patterns, especially human shapes, in random stimuli. This is called pareidolia. A pile of clothes on a chair in a dark room, a shadow cast by a streetlight. The sleepy, panicked brain could easily interpret these ambiguous shapes as a menacing figure. It's a perfectly rational explanation for why someone might think they see a person in the shadows. But the believers, the people who have had these experiences, will tell you it's more than that. They argue that the consistency of the descriptions across cultures and time periods points to something genuinely paranormal. Why do so many different people, who have never spoken to each other, all describe a man in a hat? Why is the feeling of malevolence so specific and so universally reported? They believe these are not hallucinations but glimpses into another dimension, of interdimensional beings that exist on a different plane. Another theory from the paranormal world is that these are not ghosts of the dead, but something else entirely. They are described as non-human entities, beings that have never been alive in the way we understand it. They are drawn to places and people experiencing negative emotions, sadness, depression, anger, and they feed on that energy, which is a truly horrifying thought. The idea that your own anxiety could be a dinner bell for some shadow monster is next-level scary. Ultimately, the Shadow People of Worcester and the world remain one of the most chilling and perplexing modern mysteries, because the haunting isn't in a house, it's in your head. It blurs the line between the supernatural and the psychological, between a genuine paranormal event and a trick of our own complex brains. And that ambiguity is what makes it so terrifying. Is it a dream, or is there really a dark figure standing in your room watching you, waiting for you to open your eyes? Good luck sleeping tonight. For our final legend, we're heading to a place with a name that sounds like it was ripped straight from a horror movie, the House of the Blind in Bridgewater. This story has all the classic elements of a great haunting, a tragic history, a brutal crime, and a whole lot of terrifying experiences reported by those who have dared to venture near it. The house itself is gone now, torn down years ago, but the legend and the alleged hauntings remain. The story goes that the house was once home to a family, and the father, for reasons lost to time and legend, was blind. The details of the tragedy vary depending on who's telling the tale, which is pretty common with local folklore. But the most popular version is grim. One night the father, in a fit of rage or madness, brutally murdered his entire family before taking his own life. It's a horrific, senseless act of violence that is said to have permanently scarred the land. After the murders, the house stood abandoned for years, slowly falling into ruin. It became a local legend, a place that teenagers would dare each other to visit, and that's when the stories of paranormal activity really took off. People who trespassed on the property reported a whole menu of classic ghostly encounters. They heard disembodied screams, the sounds of children crying, and blood-curdling shrieks echoing from the empty, decaying structure. The visual phenomena were just as frightening. Visitors claimed to see shadowy figures moving past the broken windows or orbs of light floating through the woods surrounding the property. Some even reported seeing the full-bodied apparition of a man, believed to be the spirit of the murderous father, still stalking the grounds of his former home, his rage echoing through time. The feeling of being watched was said to be intense and constant. Even after the house was demolished, the stories didn't stop. The land where it once stood is now part of the Hockomock Swamp, an area already famous for its own paranormal lore and cryptid sightings. It's part of the Bridgewater Triangle, a hotbed of weirdness in Massachusetts. It seems the negative energy of the place has seeped into the soil itself. People who hike or explore the area still report the same phenomena: strange noises, feelings of dread, and the sense that they are not alone. Now let's put on our skeptic hats for a moment. This story is very hard to verify historically. There are no official records or newspaper articles from the time that confirm a brutal murder-suicide of a blind man and his family at that specific location. This is a huge red flag. It's highly likely that the gruesome backstory is just that. A story, a piece of folklore created to explain why an old abandoned house is so creepy. Old abandoned houses are inherently spooky. They creak, they groan, things rustle in the walls. Our minds are excellent at filling in the blanks with scary scenarios. A group of teenagers hyped up on adrenaline and ghost stories entering a dark, dilapidated house? It's the perfect recipe for a paranormal experience, whether a real ghost is present or not. Every strange sound becomes a footstep, every shadow a figure. But what about the reports that continue even after the house is gone? This is where it gets a little more interesting. The idea of a place memory or a stone tape theory is popular in paranormal circles. This theory suggests that intense emotional events can be recorded onto the physical environment and replayed under certain conditions. Could the sheer trauma of the alleged event have left a permanent psychic impression on the land itself? It's a fascinating, if unproven, idea. It would explain why the hauntings continue. The land itself is the source of the haunting, not the building. The screams and cries aren't conscious spirits, they're just echoes of a terrible past, replaying over and over again for anyone sensitive enough to perceive them. It's a less personal but somehow more chilling form of haunting. The legend of the House of the Blind is a perfect example of how a horror story can take on a life of its own. It combines a terrifying, if likely fictional, backstory with a genuinely spooky location to create a powerful and enduring piece of local folklore. It doesn't matter if the murders actually happened. People believe they did, and that belief gives the place its power. It's a testament to our need to tell stories, to give a name to the things that scare us in the dark woods, and to warn others away from places where tragedy, real or imagined, has left its mark. So there you have it. From a winged omen in the woods to a ghostly harbinger on the coast, from a town consumed by madness to the shadows in your bedroom and the echoes of a brutal crime. Massachusetts is a state that's practically overflowing with history, and it seems a lot of that history doesn't want to stay in the past. These legends are more than just scary stories, they're a part of the landscape, a reflection of our deepest fears about the unknown, the unjust, and the darkness that can exist both in the world and within ourselves. They stick with us because they feel like they could be real. What do you think? Is there a kernel of truth to these tales? Or are they just the product of overactive imaginations and a long history of spooky New England nights? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and if you know of any other creepy legends from Massachusetts or from your own hometown, be sure to share them. I'm always on the lookout for a good, chilling story. Maybe we'll even investigate it in a future video. If you enjoyed our little trip into the dark side of the Bay State, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the strange and unexplained. We have plenty more mysteries to unravel and spooky stories to tell. Thank you so much for watching, for joining me on this journey into the shadows. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and maybe, just maybe, sleep with a nightlight on tonight. I'll see you in the next one.